mean, I think if Nigel Farage wants to do something, as we've seen in the past, I don't think he'll particularly need time to kind of get his feet under the table. If he's going to do something, it will happen, and it will likely have a sort of seismic impact, as everything that he does tends to do.
Some up-to-the-minute political analysis from the Sunday Times' political editor Caroline Wheeler on today's top political stories. Hello, Caroline.
Good morning.
Seem to throw an extra syllable in there somewhere. We've all been a bit wrong. Very nice to see you. Look, front page of the Times this morning. The Metropolitan Police have confirmed the Post Office is now under criminal investigation over potential fraud offences. Is this a significant development, do you think? Is it not a bit strange that it's taken a TV drama to sort of force this really to the front of the political agenda?
Well, my understanding is there has been a police investigation ongoing now for some time, and there have been reports of this before. I think, yes, it's a bit like the Hillsborough scandal. When we saw that drama kind of hit our screens, it became a kind of national moment. Everybody kind of finally saw the true horror of what had gone on, and I think that that's what's happened here. However, that's not in any way to diminish, I think, from the scandal as it is. I mean, I knew quite a lot about it already. I've just finished watching the drama, and, you know, it's absolutely appalling. And I have to say, having spent decades looking into the contaminated blood scandal, it has really painful echoes of that in terms of sort of state cover-up, and then, you know, the procrastination in terms of actually making right by these people. And I think the fact that they've been waiting 20 years for any kind of resolution to this, whether it be compensation or just simply having convictions quashed. I mean, in so many of the cases, individuals have still got criminal records as a consequence of this, and went to prison as a result of it. So absolutely harrowing and, you know, appalling. But there is a kind of political dimension to this, because the Post Office is still state-owned, and, you know, the UK government is still the main shareholder. And I would have thought that this will lead to further questions in the House of Commons about what exactly the government is going to do now.
Yeah.
We've heard already this morning from the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, that he thinks that they should really now be putting rocket boosters under the response to this. There is a public inquiry ongoing into it, and there has already been an offer of compensation. But as I think the drama spells out really clearly, every part of this process has just taken a painfully long time to come to any conclusion, and I think that's something that the government will now need to address with some urgency.
I mean, the sort of the compensation making right now is one issue. Do you sense, are there going to be people who are going to be publicly embarrassed for their failures, politicians who are going to be publicly embarrassed for their failures in the past? I know Ed Davey was quick out of the blocks this week to say he was misled, he was lied to, he did what he could. But, you know, he was the sort of in charge of the minister in charge of the Post Office at the time. Do you think, are there going to be other people in his shoes who maybe just this came on their desk and was just sort of pushed away because it was a bit complex and a bit weird and they didn't really understand it?
Absolutely. I think, you know, sadly, when something goes wrong in this country, there is often a moment where government ministers, civil servants all seem to want to kind of hide behind a lie and start burying furiously. And, you know, we've heard evidence of, you know, documents being shredded yet again with this particular scandal. So rather than wanting to address these issues, it does seem that, you know, government ministers, civil servants adopt a kind of groupthink to this, and it all becomes about culpability. And I think, I mean, that's something, if you read Theresa May's book on the abuse of power, that she addresses time and time again about her own experiences in government, is that it's far too defensive, that in essence, when things go wrong, ministers, civil servants all adopt kind of the position of the defence barrister, as opposed to actually as opposed to actually looking at the issues, you know, analysing them in a kind of cold-hearted, dispassionate way, and then trying to make amends. It seems to be something that has to be dragged out of people kicking and screaming. And yes, I do think that this is going to see more politicians, but also more of those individuals involved in this scandal, whether it be the Post Office or Fujitsu. I think they're in for a rough time.
Okay, easy question now. When's the general election going to be?
Oh, thanks for that. Well, we've heard the Prime Minister say that it is his working assumption it will be in the second half of the year. I think many people think that this he said that in response to the kind of elephant trap that the opposition were trying to sort of force him into, which was to get to a kind of May time and then say that he's bottled it in the same way that Gordon Brown did, which obviously was really, really damaging to his premiership. So he seems to be kind of moving the goalpost slightly, suggesting that it will be more likely in the autumn. I think that, that makes sense for a number of reasons, particularly surrounding the economy. If there's now any suggestion that we might move back to the kind of 2% interest rates, which, we didn't think was ever going to be possible, but people seem to be talking about more.
But we could also be going into recession.
So, well, that's also, I think, I'm not absolutely sure that anything that the Prime Minister says tells us anything dramatically new about what's going on. I think it was much more about party management and management of the kind of tactics that were being used by the opposition, accusing him of being a sort of squatter in Downing Street. I mean, any Prime Minister has that power to call an election at a time of their choosing, and obviously they're going to call an election at the time that they think is going to be most opportune for them, and I don't think that the metrics have changed on that. I think it was more about trying to kind of dampen the speculation and dampen the disquiet about why he wasn't going to have one in May.
Where do you think the government, the Conservative Party anyway, are with Reform UK? Because there was some suggestion a few weeks back that Nigel Farage was going to breeze out the jungle straight into a sort of high-profile role in this new party. They're going to be an enormous threat to the Conservative Party. And as it was this week, he didn't bother to turn up to the press conference. You've got Richard Tice sort of forlornly begging him to come and take his job away or whatever the hell's going on there. Do you think, is that a factor in... Because I guess there were theories anyway that if they were particularly worried about Reform UK hitting them, they were going to have an election sooner so that this whole structure couldn't develop. Has that calculation changed, do you think?
I suspect that the reform element of it is a lesser concern than some of the others, given that, what we tend to know about elections is it all comes down to kind of pounds and pence and how people feel about what's going into their pockets each month, which is why I think, there is a kind of sense that the government does want to go long because it wants longer to try and capitalise on some of those tax cuts that it hopes will come in the spring. And indeed, there's already been a tax cut today. So it wants more time for that to kind of percolate and for people to start feeling better off. Reform UK, I think if Nigel Farage wants to do something, as we've seen in the past, I don't think he'll particularly need time to kind of get his feet under the table. If he's going to do something, it will happen, and it will likely have a sort of seismic impact, as everything that he does tends to do. I think he has been muttering to everybody that timing is everything. He clearly has a plan. He's obviously got some kind of idea of how...
You really think he is going to enter the fray in some way at some point before the election?
Yeah. The suggestion is that he's going to take more of a strategic role rather than putting himself up as an MP and risk failing for, is it an eighth or ninth time to become an MP, which is, a fairly embarrassing record. But I'm absolutely sure that he'll want to play some kind of role, particularly as we also see potentially dramatic events on the other side of the Atlantic. And of course, he still has that contact with Donald Trump, and he will obviously want to be using that to absolute maximum effect, one would presume.
Over to Labour. The Times reports this morning Labour is planning to scale back their flagship 2028 billion Green Pledge, which was sort of really what they were going to be all about. Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves apparently fear that the Tory cuts strategy in the budget will leave them no room to basically spend what they were going to be spending on, I guess, what is sort of Britain's equivalent of Joe Biden's Green Deal, boosting the economy. That was what a Labour government was supposed to be all about, and they're now not doing it. Why are they not doing it? What impact do you think that might happen?
So I think this story has been kind of in the ether for some time. Ever since there was that first kind of scaling back that Rachel Reeves did several months ago, I think that it's always been the suggestion that the 28 billion wasn't quite what we thought it was in any event, partly because some of the money that was being pledged as part of that is already being spent by this government. I think from what Sir Keir Starmer has said, they are genuine in their desire to spend this money. They can't really do much of what they have pledged to do without it. For example, setting up a energy company, which is basically going to be a kind of national energy company in order to push through some of those really key changes that they want to do with the grid. So I think that is obviously still an ambition for them. But look, they're dealing with the world as they see it. I think that, it's fairly clear to all of us that there are going to be tax cuts. That is going to cost a lot of money. If you think about a penny off income tax, you're looking at sort of 5 billion to 6 billion quid every time that happens, and that's gonna make the wriggle room incredibly small for them. I mean, I think it's about timing for them in terms of whether they kind of ratchet it up over the 5-year period so that they hit it by the end of their time in office, if indeed they are elected in the first place. But I think it just tells us that they want to be pragmatic. They don't want to be labelled a party that's fast and loose with the country's finances. So they need to be extremely cautious in what they do. However, there is a downside to that, which is that a lot of kind of Labour voters are looking at it, as you've just sort of stated, and are saying, well, what are they going to do? What are they about? What do they stand for? If even before they come into office, they're already ditching and indeed scaling back their kind of grand plan, as it were.
Yep, sure. And look, briefly, before I let you go, Chris Skidmore, Whip, has resigned. There's going to be yet another by-election. What's going to happen there?
Well, gosh, how many more by-elections have we got? I think we've got 3 on the cards, haven't we?
Yeah.
If you take into effect the possibility that Scott Benton will be facing one as well.
It's why lasting till the autumn's only his working assumption, maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean, and, I think it's the start of a kind of deluge of MPs standing down, Conservative MPs, household names who perhaps don't fancy the fight this time round, announcing that they're going to go. And obviously, all of the 3 by-elections that are coming up are in sort of strategically difficult places for the government, and I think that does sort of add to the kind of stench of decline that this government sort of seems to be steeped in at the moment, and I think that will be a concern for the Prime Minister. But I mean, I think Chris Skidmore, he did the net zero review. He obviously feels very keenly that he did a lot of work. He invested a lot of himself into this review, and then slowly but surely everything that he had investigated, everything that he'd recommended has been completely undone. So I think he's slightly to be forgiven for feeling fairly hard done by. But I think Rishi Sunak will be particularly disappointed that he's felt the need to not only resign the whip, but also trigger another by-election.